Carolyn, I know that I don't need to tell you that what is happening to you today in ordination, it's not going to make you anything other than you've already been. When you wake up tomorrow morning, you're going to be the same old Carolyn you always were. However, along the way, there are going to be temptations to think otherwise. And it's not your fault. It's part of the job. It's part of the business in which we're engaged. As pastors, we are connected with people in some of the most sacred moments of their lives. In times of birth and death, in times of success and failure, in times of distress, disillusionment, disgrace, and danger. And we become understandably very special to those people because of those intimate moments that are so sacred. They tell their friends about us. And all of a sudden, without knowing it, people think of us as special. We might even enjoy it ourselves. There are these little pedestals that somehow or other we stand upon. For that matter, even the preaching ministry can do that. If we are given the gift of preaching, we come to enjoy it. It's fun to bring off a sermon and know you've done well. But preaching can become a performance more than prophecy. So just know that all along the way, there are going to be these temptations. Of course, one of the most interesting parts of being different in ordination is how the rest of the world thinks about us. Because all kinds of people who have nothing to do with the church, no contact with religion, think that we are a rather odd breed apart. I mean, the next time you have to fly someplace and you get seated in the airliner next to a talkative stranger, by all means, try not to tell them that you're a pastor. Of course, it may slip out. They may say, "What do you do for a living?" And you'll have to tell them. And once they know this, all normal conversation will cease. They'll try to say something religious, which more often than not is to ask you, have you heard the joke about the three preachers who were having lunch? Try to laugh at it, although you've heard it 1,000 times before. If not, then they'll clam up and not talk to you for the rest of the flight. Let me tell you a story, Carolyn. I had two separate ministries in Louisville, Kentucky, separated between them by 28 years. In the first one, I was the pastor of a suburban church, and one thing that I inherited was a Wednesday businessmen's luncheon at a restaurant downtown, not far from the corner of 4th and Walnut Streets. What I did not know at that time is that at that corner of 4th and Walnut, the legendary Trappist monk Thomas Merton experienced one of the holiest moments of his life. At that moment, on that busy street corner, he realized that his separation from the world as a Trappist monk was an illusion, that it did not make him alien to the rest of the human family. Now, you know how separate the Trappist life is. I mean, these people live in another world. I mean, they arise at 3 o'clock for the first prayers of the day, and then throughout the day, they observe these other hours of prayer until the last one, Compline, around 8 o'clock, after which they do not go to their rooms to watch TV, but go to bed because it starts all over again 3 o'clock the next morning. They wear a special clothing. They have a special diet. They live mostly in a world of silence in which they speak only when it's absolutely necessary. In addition to that, Thomas Merton was even withdrawn and separated from that community. He lived for his final years all by himself as a hermit. I mean, talk about being different and separate. I mean, he lived in a world apart from the rest of us. And yet, on that one day when he had come to town on some routine business for the Abbey, he stood on that corner and suddenly realized that he loved these people, that he could not be alien from them. And he wrote down, "Thank God that I am like other people. Thank God that I am a part of the human race in which God became incarnate." He realized that foundational truth, as Paul put it, that before the foundation of the world, before anything was, God decided ahead of time that we would all be adopted as his children. In that moment in which he realized he was ordinary, he realized that everybody was extraordinary. He saw the beauty and the depth of their hearts, the person that everyone really is because of the incarnate Christ in the eyes of God. And he said, if only people could see themselves as they are in God's eyes, because all of them are shining like the sun. Well, Carolyn, I wish someone had told me this at my ordination, which was in 1953, 65 years ago, when you were just a tiny little girl. In the very severe church to which I finally came as a teenager, we were taught that it was different than that. We were taught that people were horribly lost sinners on the verge of sliding into hell, and that their only protection was to buy into our fire insurance program, which we called a plan of salvation. It took me years to arrive at my own corner of 4th and Walnut. But you don't have to take that long. You can land running. You can start with where Paul left us when he said, before the foundation of the world, God decided that we were his children. It's God's decision, not ours. You can express this in all kinds of ways. You can tell people that beyond the passing pleasure of their possessions, there's something deep that's already there in their hearts, that there's an undiscovered little room at the back of their heart where Christ awaits to be recognized. They already have the greatest thing in the world. You can, as Quaker George Fox put it, walk cheerfully over the world, embracing that of God in everyone else. Now, this does not mean that your life is going to be all sweetness and light. Because if you really believe this, that all people are the children of God, you're going to have to find some way to identify with all the little people, the millions of them on the face of the earth who are denied this dignity. You know, the vast, almost the majority of the world's people end their day feeling like they've been run over by a truck. They live in poverty, disease, hunger, malnutrition, in addition to which they're kicked around like pawns in the great games of nations. But they're the little people whom Jesus called the least of these, my brothers and sisters. You've got to find some way to be identified with them. Whatever it may be, you may find that it may not make you popular with the big people. In addition to that, you have to tell them what is the really good news of the gospel, that God not only loves these little people, but he loves all of the big bad people. He loves our enemies. And that can be just too much for some people. I've heard people say when Jesus said, love your enemies, he must have meant something else. But that's your ministry. And what a joyful ministry it is. You know, in that very severe church of my teen years, when I finally got to stand in the pulpit, I saw something that only the preacher could see. On a plaque above the pew Bible was that quotation from the Gospel of John when Greeks came seeking to know Jesus, and it said, in the words of the old King James, "Sir, we would see Jesus."